You're not dreaming. You're watching the Ghouligans, Episode 6, Misunderstood Monsters Looking for a Place in This World. This experience has nearly broken Mr. Lobo, having to talk at length about a show that I had absolutely no involvement in. I do appreciate the producers of this show for giving me a chance to exercise my jaw for 3 hours. And here we have the very last alternate intro where the whole sign falls apart. And the episode is called Party Till Ya Puke. And boy, did we have a party, didn't we, folks? I'd like to read to you some of the article that I wrote for Horror Hosts and Creature Features, our blog, which probably led to these boys asking Mr. Lobo to do this audio commentary for you. This is a critical review, as well as a general article about those cool creeps and the challenges they obviously face. With the decline of broadcast and DVD, the stranglehold of corporate media, and the glut of amateurs horror content on the internet, and the attention span of the average monster kid diminishing for about 4 seconds, a lot of you reading this may not have taken the time to actually watch the Ghouligans. Now, let me break here to tell you that they just referenced Back to the Future, the scene where Michael J. Fox is playing the guitar and blows himself back. He says, "Whoa, rock and roll." There's a lot of Michael J. Fox references with Wolfgang, and that's probably because of Teen Wolf. Back into the article. We had the DVDs in our possession for some time. Why did it take us so long to check it out? Mr. Lobo saw some of their old black and white stuff on YouTube years ago, Home Sweet Home Transylvania, and liked it. As an independent producer myself, I often deal with the reality of my peers and potential fans who love the idea of my show, putting off actually watching it for months, many years. Is it fear of disappointment? Is it jealousy? You'd be surprised how many shows I go to where it's like people that I've known for 10 years who say, "I finally watched your show." And this is kind of an odd thing because, if my best friend had a TV show, I'd like to think I'd watch it. But people are weird. So I go into that a little bit with this article. Anyway, who secretly doesn't want to have their own horror comedy show? I guess people are afraid to look the creators of a show in the eye at conventions or events or shows or in social situations and tell them truthfully how they feel about what is obviously, and in this case obviously, a back-breaking labor of love. That's Rob Dimension, by the way, is one of the bully ghouls, another horror host. Many fawn all over the plight of the independent film director, but few share the same support for independent TV producers. It's not as simple as Sci-Fi Channel should pick them up. You know, that old saw. The technical and legal hoops that one must jump through to get on network cable are discouraging, to say the least. Let Mr. Lobo end the suspense for you right now. They're good. Dixie Delamorto, Miss Mittens, and Mr. Lobo sat down and watched both DVDs straight through. That's 6 total episodes and 2 bonus cuts. And even with the potential bro vibe, it's balanced with some heart. And it's often very smart in its knowledge of the genre and in its satire. Growing up with Filmation's The Ghoulies, the Groovy Ghoulies, a spin-off of Sabrina and Archie Comics. And speaking of Archie Comics, Boyd's original hat was a Jughead hat. So we definitely want to stop and point that out. And we're seeing the origin of the knit cap. The Mike Nesmith knit cap came from his girlfriend back in high school.
Come on, Boyd. Enough with your creepy stalker. You love
of course, Hanna-Barbera's Drac Pack, Saturday morning version of the Monster Squad, and all of them featuring good guy versions of classic monsters. They had a lot the Ghouligans had a lot of memories to compete with. However, it was fun over the course of all these episodes to watch them find their own thing. This show is incredibly ambitious, and kudos to everyone involved in this homegrown independent series. These guys are horror heroes. When you watch, you sometimes forget what they're up against, and that how much of this is an amazing undertaking for such a low-budget show. Everyone is doing the work of 10 people. The makeup effects range from brilliant to barely passable. It's sometimes unclear who their audience is. The humor is often too adult for kids and too kid-like for many adults. But on the plus side, there's something for everyone. Is it a struggle to find their audience? A struggle to find their own voice, or just a reflection of the many different personalities involved? Whatever the case, as a viewer, you are always rooting for these guys, and you always want to be true to your ghoul, even though at times the DVD feels like a sampler. Let's talk about the name for a second. For those of you who lost your slang thesaurus, Ghouligan is a compound word made up from the word ghoul and the derogatory remark hooligan. Hooligan is a dated insult meaning thug or troublemaker, mainly used by old people and square adults in old movies and TV shows. However, there doesn't seem to be many adult characters in their world. You get the sense they are roommates entering middle age, and their days of hanging out at the malt shop or giving the crusty principal in the high school a hot foot are behind them. However, they are still binge drinking and still trying to get girlfriends, as well as fit in with their monster peers. Like the opening of Mystery Science Theater 3000, repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I really should just relax. Wolfgang W. Wolfgang seems to be the most confident and most natural performer, and as such is doing the heavy lifting in scenes. A biker-clad werewolf and a selfish party animal who often gets the other two main Ghouligans in trouble. Boris Stein, a self-made man-monster, is established as the smartest and most responsible. His better qualities are not always present depending on the skit. Boid seems to be the most consistent, most original-looking, and most dimensional character, a lonely, shy blue zombie with a Mike Nesmith knit hat. Of course, a lot of this I've reiterated over the course of these episodes in my commentary. With the first episode, Mr. Lobo was immediately hit with the bright colors, toe-tapping music, and the broad comic vibe of the Croft Super Show, complete with laugh track, which would seem to disappear as the shows went on. Some very funny references to unlikely 80s fare, like the Never-Ending Story, and in this case, Teen Wolf, as we're looking at it right now, including the car surfing. Black and white parodies of Night of the Living Dead, 1968, and Rebel Without a Cause from the 50s. The second episode, The Mommy's Curse, had a very well done spoof of Scarface, something for the stoner crowd, I expect. They introduced Bob Tutankhamun, who in a later episode does a great fake ad for his own local pyramid building business. Seems like by the end of episode 2 they lost the laugh track. I guess, again, it's supposed to be in the castle sequences. There's even a spoof of the masked Mexican wrestling movies for Santo and Blue Demon fans, which those two characters return in this episode in the party scene. Krill Grill is another favorite character. At one point he drops his surf bum persona and imitates angry smoking comedian Dennis Leary from the 90s. A highlight for anyone who actually remembers Dennis Leary. Much of the writing is farcical, and I found myself looking for more of a plot than the writers seemed to allow. These are self-aware characters doing a show. They seem to bounce from situation to situation like Warner Brothers cartoon characters. The Jackass-type reality TV spoofs of pranks played on Boid by Wolfgang and Boris are all funny and well done, even though it seems out of character for the usually square Boris to pull such shenanigans. Like I said, there's a lot of bouncing as far as tone, style, and story. No laugh track at all in the third episode, But on the second disc, the fourth episode, the canned laughter is back briefly, and Boris is suddenly shiny again like he was in the first episode. These are nitpicks, by the way. There are some inconsistencies in the makeup here and there, especially with Boris Stein. Boy, sorry, Mike. And makeup coming off the hands and around the neck, but all are very lovable throughout, and it's easy to forgive. Disco vampire Count Fleming is introduced as, well, here's the car surfing that I was talking about. Disco vampire Count Fleming is introduced, as well as some more adult humor, less Croft Super Show, more Mad TV. There are a few unexpected edgy moments, like a Mexican standoff with pistols in the men's room, a la Reservoir Dogs, with Void putting a gun to his own head. There was another bit where he actually shot himself through the head, very upsetting but somehow funny and in character. In one episode, they are leaping from world to world with a magic TV remote, and my wife Dixie leaned over and said, "Quantum leap references will get you everywhere." Well, it does with Dixie, and Mr. Lobo caught himself laughing too. Eric the Phantom, who appeared in the first episode, comes back, and like I'm fond of saying, you're not supposed to like him, and you don't. He represents the worst of the more hammy humor, which I, of course, said here in my commentary. On the second DVD, there are more well-done spoofs, like Krill Grill as Bruce Willis in Fry Hard. Some of the bits run a little thin and run a bit long. Now, coming back to this party scene that we're watching right now, we're seeing a lot of characters from throughout the series return for this final episode. So, yeah, it's kind of neat to see some of the Ghouligans and to see the robot and the Mexican wrestlers, other characters from previous episodes. As much as we love Wolfgang, W. Wolfgang, there's a George Michael music video parody that got a big laugh at first but then overstayed its welcome. Their corny humor is self-aware and is addressed in one of the better fake ads from Ulcer Corp, the Ghouligans action figures. It shows children doing dangerous things with the figures and gleefully watching as their dad is eaten by the real Ghouligans. Perhaps they made that commercial just to make it painfully clear that the shows are not intended for younger audiences. And for me, I feel like that episode is the turning point of the series. Ghouligans is full of variety, surprises, humor, and remarkable production value considering its budget. They're obviously are great, have a lot of great people who believe in them and are helping them in their quest to save horror comedy from itself. Overall, the Ghouligans are creative, colorful, and infectious. In a perfect world, they would have a blank check and worldwide distribution. For now, it's your duty to purchase your own copies of their fine work. And look out, puny humans. Here come the Ghouligans. Go get them, lads. So that's roughly what we published on our blog there. Please forgive me for reading that to you, but again, I think it does add some context as to why the Ghouligans asked me to do the audio commentary for their DVD set.
No, Boris, look, I think I should confront her and explain everything to her and make her understand I'm no coward.
This episode, again, has a lot of aspects of an 80s movie with the rotten bullies, Revenge of the Nerds.
Maybe I could use a new look.
Don't worry, Boyd. I have a plan. I've tuned this thing up just right. By the end of the night, the Ghouligans will be the coolest ghouls around. Follow me, Boyd.
Good evening, ghouls, and welcome to the full moon dance party.
I'm not sure. Let me check if I can check my notes while we're wrapping this episode up and see what the name of that band is. The band playing is called the Tombstone Brawlers, according to my notes. Again, there's a lot of subcultures that adopt monster stuff, and rockabilly certainly is another one. As you can see, there's Bob Tutt. There's Robot X, I guess, robot. In old movies, they used to call robots robots, so he's a robot. And this is the dancing in this movie. I think they're parodying the dancing in the movie House Party from the 80s with Kid and Play. That's kind of like something on a Top Secret. There was a reference to Airplane earlier where they were telling the backstory, and they come out of the backstory to the person listening covered in cobwebs. Oh, it's a nice little nod to Airplane. Again, this is not something you'd see on a 70s kids show.
All right, we're gonna take a little break. Don't nobody go nowhere. Let's give it up for Lycon, the coolest cat, dog around.
This is kind of reminding me of Back to the Future also, where you've got a situation with the hero wanting to be a rock star, having to overcome a bully, save the day at the dance.
What? The little loser's here? Let's go find him and crush him and crush his nose and crush his self-esteem. Calm down. I got a better idea. Come on.
Now we get to see the Ghouligans rock out, which again, this is hearkening to the groovy Ghoulies, I would say, which had Frankenstein, etc. as rock stars.
Cats and rock and roll rats. We are the Ghouligans. Give it up for the original rock monster, Boid and Roid.
And supposedly this is them finally cool.
Werewolf, Wolfgang W. Wolfgang.
I'll let you judge whether they're actually
Count
cool.
Fleming on the drum. Don't fight the bite, ladies.
This song is written by Paul T. Lano, who wrote the original Ghouligans theme. Boys Night Out. If you can't, if you couldn't figure out the name of the song, it's Boys Night Out. Again, you know, a lot of influence here. 70s kid shows almost always had a rock band. A lot of 60s sitcoms had their rock and roll episode. You know, you've got movies like Back to the Future where there's a climactic sequence with everyone getting won over by rockin' guitars.
Boys, it's working. We're finally cool.
I think we're gonna be rock stars, man.
And look, Lycon's digging our music.
Movies like Bill and Ted and Back to the Future were the teenagers who want to grow up to be rock stars. And again, this is real typical, lovable losers, you know, just before they really get to enjoy their success, it's kind of yanked out from underneath. Just like when they were with the three monsterettes. It's just too good to be true.
You were the most beautiful dead chick I know. I've been waiting to tell you that for 100 years. But I was too nervous.
What a nerd.
I was wondering if you'd like to go out on a date sometime. Maybe we can go grave robbing together and kiss and hug.
These guys are great as the bully zombies. I really like the colorful zombies. I think that's very creative. Bravo on the team there as far as the design. Nice cartoony zombies.
What do you got to say about that?
Zombies are usually trite and cheap, and suddenly they've made them colorful and creative, and
A stupid toy gun to be cool.
that's something to be applauded.
You know, Void, why don't you just face it? You're a waste of an open grave.
Yeah, you want a free shot? Come on, hit me right here. Right here, a free one, come on. Look, this is like a 200-year grudge, man. Look, can't we just forget about it?
Void, this time, we're gonna crush your little head.
Yeah, we're gonna take
This
your
does
head
seem like every 80s teen comedy movie. And then another 90-degree turn. The monster hunters arrive.
Monsters kill monsters? That ain't right.
Welcome to the party. I'm your host, Ben Helsing. So glad you all got my invitations. This isn't a celebration, it's an extermination. You monsters are so gullible. Take them down one by one.
Van Helsing, of course, is referencing the Dracula's nemesis, often played by Peter Cushing in a series of films as the monster hunter. There also was a very horrible movie called Van Helsing, where it is Van Helsing versus all of the monsters, all of the Universal monsters, Dr. Jekyll and Frankenstein, etc., etc. This is their version of Van Helsing, also accompanied by some colorful monster hunters, sort of reflecting movies like Aliens and Blade, and movies where monsters are getting killed. We finally get to see this pay off. Very much like a Warner Brothers cartoon. You know, you would imagine Daffy Duck getting hit on the head with an anvil like that. That guy's sort of like Blade. Of course, you know, in fights in movies, they're always hitting each other with chairs.
Hey, do you want to go hang out sometime? Maybe go back to my coffin? You know, get a bite to eat? Don't worry, I'm not looking for a one-night suck. Okay, maybe some other time then.
Then we go into a full-on Three Stooges pie fight. Classic comedy.
Hey guys! This party is awesome! You knew it was gonna get broken up! I think we should just quit and split. I thought we could fit in with the cool kids, but it seems like the Ghouligans are just born to lose. I tell you what I learned tonight, guys. I learned that if you stick up for yourself, you get your butt kicked. Oh yeah, you got your butt kicked. It was kind of funny. Hey guys!
And there they are, the four Ghouligans. Again, great job, lads. Great series. I really had a good time watching all of these episodes again, and as much as I complained about having to talk for 3 hours, there aren't four guys that I would not just any four guys I would do this for. I certainly am very proud of these guys. I think they did a remarkable job. Everything I said in the article, reading it now, I know them on a personal level in working on with them on this DVD. So I feel like maybe some of my observations were a little harsh in the initial article. It was definitely intended to be constructive criticism, because often you don't get that. You know, if you're doing something with monsters, you just get the sort of, that's cool, and you know, that's not something you can work with. It doesn't really help you. So I tried to provide comments that were helpful and honest, and it really shows what kind of guys they are, that they would appreciate that, and they would realize that I get it, and that I know what they're doing, and that I'm 100% on their side.
Like all good things, they must come to an end, Void.
Yeah. It was groovy while it lasted, though, man. What a radical time, right, Boris? Boris? Oh.
Oh, let it out.
What was in that drink?
Whiskey.
Mixed with what?
Gasoline, duh.
Hey, where's Krill Gill? Did he make it? He'll be okay.
This reminds me of the end of a lot of movies. I can't pull a title out especially, but this sort of the aftermath of the party.
Make it SPF 500.
Are you still here, Count Fleming?
Yeah, and I figured I'd stick around with you drooly ghoulies for a little while. You three need a ghoul like me in your gang. I give you bite cred.
What we need is a wooden stake.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, boy, you score with that zombie breath yet? I hear it's way hotter when the body is cold.
You know, with all the makeup that they have to wear, it might be easier to just ADR their dialogue.
I'll never dig up another girl like that again.
Well, easy come, easy go.
Just a
boy.
thought.
That's right. True love is hard to find, but it's out there. Just gotta go out and find it, Void.
Yeah, so what are we gonna do now, ghouls? The show is over.
Hey, Wolfgang, where you going, man?
It's kind of sad that it's all coming to an end. I was not joking before when I said they should take
Somewhere?
the whole series and turn it into 11-minute episodes for Adult Swim.
Another party, another place, another space and time. In need of a wild, woolly, wicked werewolf like me. The ultimate awaits. Now I'm gonna find it.
It's kind of like Time Bandits a little bit
See
too.
you on the other side, my friends.
Where is he going? He has my car keys.
I'm sorry, sir. We tried to kill them, but they narrowly escaped our grasp.
This scene was originally written for Count Farnham, but it was changed to be the
I promise you.
alternate
Next time
universe evil
and they will stay
version
there.
of the Ghouligans. This kind of reminds me of Sliders, where the tone of the episode suddenly went from a very simple premise of them being in different universes to suddenly them being pursued by the Cro-Mags. And this is kind of it reminds me of that, where you've got you know, the introduction of an enemy now. They've got evil Ghouligans that are going to be chasing them through time and space. So again, you're not really sure if that's a serious plot point or if it's another reference, another pop culture reference. Anyway, Mr. Lobo is ready to collapse now. I hope you sleep well, because I know that I'm going to. I'd like to thank Wild Eye Releasing and the Ghouligans for giving me this opportunity to completely unravel in this audio commentary. Thank you very much. Good night. Drive safely.